On 12 November 1932, a decorated World War I veteran named Major G.P.W. Meredith set up 2 Lewis machine guns in a field near Campion, Western Australia. His orders were official military orders. His targets were emus. Within days, the Australian government would quietly ask him to pack up those guns and go home. Not because the mission was complete. Because the emus had defeated the Australian army. You were never taught this in school. And there is a reason for that. This is not a quirky nature story. This is a government military operation, authorized at the highest levels, that ended in one of the most embarrassing public defeats in the history of any nation's armed forces. The official after-action reports exist. The parliamentary debates exist. Major Meredith himself admitted, on the record, that the emus could face machine guns with the invulnerability of tanks. A decorated soldier compared birds to tanks. This happened. Here is how we got there. After World War I ended, the Australian government made a promise to veterans. Thousands of soldiers who had survived the trenches of France and Belgium were offered land in Western Australia under a soldier settlement scheme. They were going to build a new life farming wheat in the Campion district, east of Perth. The land was real. The promise was real. But the Australian interior is not a gentle place. Drought hit. Markets collapsed. And then, in 1932, approximately 20,000 emus arrived. These were not random birds wandering through. Emus migrate seasonally toward the coast in enormous numbers. They had been doing this for tens of thousands of years. The newly settled farmland simply happened to be sitting directly in their path. The birds tore through crops. They broke fences. They created openings in those fences that allowed rabbits to flood in behind them, compounding the destruction. The veteran farmers were already financially desperate from the wheat price collapse. Now they were watching their fields get annihilated by 6-foot-tall birds that absolutely did not care about property rights. The farmers rode to the government. And the government, to its credit or shame depending on how you look at it, took the problem very seriously. Sir George Pearce, the Australian Minister of Defence, approved a military operation. Major Meredith was assigned 2 soldiers and 2 Lewis guns, the same weapons used to cut down men in the trenches of Europe. They were given 10,000 rounds of ammunition. The operation was framed as a genuine pest control exercise with a side benefit of providing training for the soldiers. A film crew was invited. The government expected to look heroic. The operation began on the 2nd of November, 1932. It went wrong almost immediately. The first problem was the emus themselves. They refused to behave like a proper enemy. The massive flock of 20,000 birds simply would not group together in a way that allowed the machine guns to be effective. When the soldiers opened fire, the flock would instantly splinter into dozens of smaller groups and scatter in every direction. You cannot machine gun birds that will not stand still. It sounds absurd. The numbers make it real. In the first 2 days of the operation, the soldiers fired hundreds of rounds and killed fewer than 12 birds confirmed. The guns also jammed repeatedly in the dusty Australian conditions. The second problem was that emus are extraordinarily difficult to kill. Major Meredith would later report that individual birds had absorbed burst after burst of machine gun fire and simply kept moving. He described their resilience in terms that would sound like a science fiction film if they were not in an official military document. One soldier compared trying to kill emus to trying to kill Zulus, an uncomfortable colonial comparison that tells you something about how seriously these men took the psychological blow of losing to birds. By the 14th of November, public mockery in the Australian press had become a national scandal. Members of Parliament were openly joking about awarding the emus their own military medals. The ornithologist and soldier Major Meredith was described in newspapers as having been out General ED by wildlife. The Minister of Defence, Sir George Pearce, earned a nickname from the Australian press that would follow him for the rest of his political career. They called him the Minister for the Emu War. The operation was officially suspended on the 19th of November, 1932, after fewer than 300 birds had been killed at a cost of approximately 2,500 rounds per confirmed kill. If this surprised you, subscribe. We cover the history they never taught you, and it only gets stranger from here. But here is the part of this story that almost nobody tells. The operation was not over. It came back, twice. After the public humiliation of November, farmers continued to be devastated. They applied again. The military returned in December of 1932. They returned again in 1948, in 1949, in 1951, in 1943, and in 1948 once more. The Australian government conducted repeated military-style culling operations against emus for nearly 2 decades. They never fully solved the problem. The emus kept coming back. Every single year. Because the emus were following a migration route that predated every farm, every fence, and every Lewis gun on the continent by roughly 80 million years. The legacy of the Emu War is not really about military incompetence. It is about something more uncomfortable. It is about what happens when modern industrial civilization plants itself directly in the path of a natural system and expects the natural system to move. The veteran farmers had been handed land with no real understanding of what that land already was. The government offered military force as a solution to what was fundamentally an ecological and economic crisis. The guns did not work because guns were never the right answer. The emus still migrate through Western Australia today. The farmland is still there. The fences get broken every year. Major Meredith eventually recommended that the farmers simply be supplied with better fences. That turned out to be correct. It took years of public humiliation, 2 suspended military operations, and a politician permanently nicknamed after a bird for the Australian government to reach the conclusion that a fence works better than a machine gun against an animal that has been walking the same route since before human beings existed. History never runs out of moments like this. Moments that were buried, laughed off, or quietly reclassified because they made powerful people look ridiculous. Subscribe if you want more of them. Every week we find the story they left out of your textbook, and this one was just the beginning.